Let me read to you a passage from the 22nd chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, verses 1 to 14. It's the Gospel for Thursday of the 20th week in Ordinary Time. St. Matthew writes, Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Then he sent some more servants and said, 'Tell those who have been invited that I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fattened calf have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to my wedding banquet.' But they paid no attention and went off, one to his field, another to his business. The rest seized his servants, ill-treated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burnt their city. Then he said to his servants, 'The wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited did not deserve to come. Go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you can find.' So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, both good and bad, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing wedding clothes. 'Friend,' he asked, 'how did you get in here without wedding clothes?' The man was speechless. Then the king told the attendants, 'Tie him hand and foot and throw him outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and grinding of teeth. For many are invited, but few are chosen.'" That's from Matthew chapter 22, verses 1 to 14. What does it suggest to us? Well, a student determines to make good progress at school because he has ambitions. He has set his heart on this or that career, and he is determined to make it. So he applies himself and succeeds, gaining a good place at university in the tertiary school of his choice. He goes on from there to a profession and enters business or some other career path. He marries, has a few children, and has plans and hopes for them. At the end of his life's run, he has been quite successful. Now, what has been the essential dynamic of his life? In his case, it has been the pursuit of some chosen goals. His life has been something he himself has built up and defined. Other calls and beckonings he has set aside as not being commensurate with what he himself has preferred and chosen. His life has been, as we might put it colloquially, his thing, and he has got there. Of course, there are many others who also have chosen their paths, but have not got there. Still, in their case too, the fundamental pattern has been the pursuit of personally chosen goals that have appeared desirable. But there is another kind of life with a different dynamic. The other person could even be a friend of that first that I've just been describing. In his case, though, life has been not so much the pursuit of attractive and chosen goals as the response to calls. He does not contemplate and then select his own future. Rather, he sees it opening up before him as an invitation. In one form or another, it is the sense of being called which is fundamental in his case. He feels a vague invitation to serve others generously, perhaps in a specific profession or business or whatever. But the essential thing is that his life unfolds as a response to a higher invitation, a calling. He seems to be drawn forward from without rather than determining his life from within. His disposition seems to be open and responsive to invitations, summonses, appeals, invitations, in a word, to calls. Fundamentally, his life is a vocation rather than just a career, even though, like his career-minded friend, he too is a doctor, an engineer, a politician, a businessman, a teacher, or whatever. In our Gospel today that I read earlier, our Lord describes in parable form what is going on in life from God's point of view. He is continually extending calls to us. Life is shown by our Lord's parable to consist of a call, a vocation, an invitation, a summons. It is not just a personally chosen career. We read in the Gospel that the kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. God has a glorious prospect in mind for us, but what will bring this to naught is our imperviousness to his invitations. Our own chosen goals, our own preferred career, in a word, our own thing, will bring God's plan down in our regard. Notice the reaction of those in the parable to whom the invitation was extended. They refused to come. A further invitation was sent, but they paid no attention and went off, one to his field, another to his business. The rest seized his servants, ill-treated them and killed them. They had their own agendas in life. There was a fundamental resistance to invitations. In the first book of Samuel, in chapter 3, we read that the boy Samuel was sleeping in the temple of the Lord where the ark was, the ark of God. The Lord called to Samuel, who answered, "Here I am." Not understanding what had really happened, Samuel ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." "I did not call you," Eli said. And once again God called Samuel, and Samuel immediately responded. It was soon understood that God was calling Samuel. We read that Samuel grew up and the Lord was with him, not permitting any word of his to be without effect. Samuel's life was the living out of a vocation, and he was open to the calls of the Lord and he obeyed them. Our Lord's parable in the Gospel we heard earlier makes it clear that the life of each one of us is a call, an invitation, a vocation. We must not allow it to become a mere career. It is a call to holiness of life and to a share in the mission of Jesus Christ, lived out in the ordinary duties which the providence of God gives us to do. Let us think of the wedding banquet to which God has invited each one of us, the wedding banquet of heaven, which shall last forever. Our attaining that prize depends on our hearing the call of God in life and living according to it. He wants us all there, but we must be found wearing the wedding garments. Let us not be found speechless at the end, like that one in the parable, and then cast outside. The true career, the greatest adventure, is to hear the call of God, his invitation, and respond to it generously.